Hey everybody, it's me, Minu, here with a new video, a new type of video for you guys. And I'm gonna set the stage. So, close your eyes. Imagine being born into a rich family. Imagine being the child of a famous singer, someone like Beyonce, someone who everybody loves and adores. You grow up in this beautiful big house. You grow up listening to your mother's music, hearing your mother in the radio, in the car, everywhere you go. People are loving and adoring your mother, and you love and adore her as well. You grow up in this big house wanting for nothing. You and your 3 siblings live in luxury, basically. Even your father doesn't have to do much other than, do stuff around the house. But really, it's just we're all gathering around our matriarch. We are all supporting our mother, who is this amazingly talented artist who is beloved and adored by everyone. And you live this life for 20 plus years. You grow up in this wonderful, wonderful, lavish life. And one day your mother gets sick. She goes to the hospital, she gets checked out, and you find out that she's not going to get better. And you naturally think, well, we have all the money that we could ever need, so we should be able to take care of her, right? She should be good financially, right? 3 years in, your family's completely out of money. Your mother can no longer afford to stay in the hospital. Your father has put a second mortgage on a house just to be able to afford your mother's medication. She's immobile. She can barely move. She lays in bed all day. And your whole world has just gone upside down in the matter of just a few years. That wonderful, amazing college that you were attending, you had to drop out to take care of your family and take care of your mother. And the only way your mother can communicate with you is by ringing a bell. She can't talk. She can't move. She just lays in bed all day, and you guys have to come and take care of her, selling off things just so you and your family can have food, because you are now at the point where you can't even really afford meat to eat. In just 3 years of your mother not being able to create more music or do concerts or shows or anything like that, your family has become poor just that quickly. The royalties have dried up. There's no more money coming in. Your father has to figure out what he can do to make money for the family, but even he is struggling to come up with anything. And just like that, your whole life has just turned upside down. This is what happens to Rini in the movie Satan's Slaves, or if I want to be extra, I would say Pengabdi Setan, which is the Indonesian version of it. I'm still probably pronouncing it wrong, but I'm telling you, it's what I thought it was interesting when I saw it. And I like to give movies their props when they have a very interesting name. But this is what happens to Rini in Satan's Slaves. Her mother, Mortuary, was a very, very famous singer, and they grew up in a life of luxury until she fell ill, and she just did not get better. And so the movie is basically, and again, I want to say too, just want to do a little disclaimer here. This video is not meant to replace watching the actual movie. Watching the actual movie is an experience. And I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed this pacing, which is why I really want to talk about it. But if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to spoil the whole movie. So if you want to see the movie without spoilers, please go watch the movie. It's on Shudder at the time of me recording this. So please go watch the movie. But with that out the way, this is where the beginning of the story is. Rini, who is about 23, I believe, the oldest of 4 children, the only daughter of the family, has dropped out of college in order to take care of her little brothers and her mother and the family. Her grandmother is there, but she's in a wheelchair. She's very old, and the father is struggling to figure out how he's going to make money for the family. So she has basically taken over the role as the mother of the household, cooking, cleaning, making sure the kids are taken care of. And really, because no one else is doing it, grandmother can't do it, her father Bari can't do it, and their mother Mortuary is bedridden. And so it's already, you're already off to a sad start, and you're wondering like what kind of craziness is going to happen. Like, it's, you know, this is one of the first things that scared me in the movie. And I'm not somebody who's really scared often. This is one of the first things that scared me in the movie, was the fact that their mother, Mortuary, all she can do to communicate with people is to ring a bell. They hear that bell, they go check on her. Are you okay, Mom? What's going on? And the children are really, really sweet about it. The oldest brother, the oldest son, let me make sure I got everybody's name right, Toni, he's incredibly sweet to her. He comes in and he combs her hair. He talks to her. The only person who is a little bit awkward with the child is the 10-year-old Bondi. Bondi feels really weird. He feels really uncomfortable. He feels like something's off. He's like not comfortable going around Mom. He doesn't understand why she's at home as opposed to being in the hospital. He feels creeped out. And then the youngest of all of them is 6-year-old Ian. Ian is deaf, so he communicates with the family through sign language. Ian is very close to the grandmother. They play hide and seek together. But when it comes to dealing with Mortuary, it's really Rini and Toni. It's a really sad thing to see, but it's also really beautiful to see how the family, rallies around their matriarch and wants to take care of them. So one day, Rini hears the bell going off, and it's going off. It's very aggressive. It's just like ring, 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 going off. And she goes to check on her mom, like, oh my God, what's wrong with Mom? She's ringing the bell so hard. She goes in to check, and she comes into the room to see her mother paralyzed as usual, but ringing the bell as hard as possible and ringing it at something that she sees across the room. Mortuary is terrified of whatever it is she sees across the room. You can tell everything from her face and her body language and the way she's moving that she's like, someone please come help me, come save me. Something is trying to get her. But when Rini looks over to the upper corner of the room where her mother is looking in fear, she sees nothing. Now, in other horror movies, Rini would probably say, hey, Mom, calm down. There's nothing there. You're crazy. Calm down. But Rini is already put off. She feels that something is wrong. Like the way that, and when she goes to take the bell out of her mom's hand and tries to comfort her mom, the way she looks at the corner of that room is the look of somebody who's like, is there something there? Is she seeing something? She doesn't immediately go to doubt or gaslight her mom. She's like, the fuck is in the corner? And this is what I like about this character as a Black person, because if I came in and I saw something like that, I'm swinging at the air. I'm punching it like, what is it? Get out my mom's house. Like, get out. Like I don't know what you see, but we gonna fight it together. You know what I mean? But a lot of horror movies, they're just like, oh, you're crazy. You see it. I don't see it. Whatever. No, Rini is immediately uncomfortable with whatever it is that she's seeing, whatever it is that her mother is seeing in the corner. And I thought that was a really good intro into the creepiness and the scariness of the movie. It just adds to that very uncomfortable vibe of like, something's here. Something's here. And then that night when Rini is asleep, she hears the bell again and she goes to check on her mother, and she sees her mother standing out and looking out the window. Now, obviously this is surprising because her mother's bedridden. Like, they be changing her bedpan. She can't even go to the bathroom. And so she walks up to her mother. Her mother's in this beautiful dress. She's got a veil over her head. She walks up to her mother and she puts her hand on her shoulder. She's like, Mom, what are you doing? Since when can you stand up? Like, you okay? What's going on? And then she starts hearing the bell ringing again. And she looks over and she sees her mom laying in the bed, ringing the bell, looking terrified at whoever the fuck it is that Rini is now standing next to at the window. And when Rini looks back, it's not her mother. But she wakes up and it's a nightmare. Is it a nightmare? I don't think it was really a nightmare. In my mind, in my headcanon, I would like to believe that this happened and Rini just wants to believe that it was a nightmare, because shit gets crazy, but it takes a while. It's kind of a slow burn of like increasing tension and anxiety throughout the house before things just go batshit crazy. And I really appreciate that about this movie. But anyway, she wakes up, she goes check on her mother again, and everything's normal. So she's like, oh, okay, I guess I was just hallucinating or something. But then one day she gets up and she goes into the room to check on her mother, and she does see her mother standing there looking out the window. And she's afraid because she's like, oh my God, am I having another nightmare? She goes to put her hand on her mother's shoulder. Her mother turns around with a terrified look on her face and collapses into Rini's arms, dead. Obviously, this is incredibly traumatic for the family. Everyone is extremely sad, and she is buried in the cemetery in the forest near their home. So let me take a second to talk about this cemetery, because this is something that I thought was really, really weird at first, because I'm like, you have a house isolated in the woods, big, nice house. It's on well, water, everything. But your house is very, very close to a cemetery. Like, to where you can look out the window and see the cemetery. And this is a point that is made, like, it's not made in the beginning when you first see Mortuary looking outside, but it's a point that is made later when Bondi and Ian are talking, because of the fact that they can see the cemetery from their window. So that's one of the first questions you think of, like, why the hell did you, like, obviously this house was built here. Like, this wasn't just a random house that's been sitting here and the family moved in. Obviously this house was built here for a reason. Why was it built so close to a cemetery? That's weird. And that's something that doesn't make any sense until much, much later in the movie. But anyway, they have the funeral, and people show up, and this is kind of where you get an understanding that the family is not religious, that they do not participate. They're not Muslim. They're kind of like how I like to say I'm culturally Christian. They're kind of culturally Muslim in the sense that they do know how to pray. They do understand the prayers and the process and all of that. And their mother is buried in a very traditional way, with their man named Ustad, who that prays over them, and the people do come to their home and then they pray about Allah and all of that. But the family does not regularly practice any of the Muslim traditions. They do not pray at all. And you can even see, as everyone is gathered around praying, that Bari, the father, is kind of over it. Like, it's annoying to him. So you get an understanding that this is not a religious family, and yet they are having these very, very weird things happen to them. Another thing that is brought up that is very interesting is Bondi says when he's at school that when someone dies, the last person to walk away from their grave, once they reach their 49th step, then the dead person will wake up. And that scares him. But Rini tells him this is ridiculous. We're not religious. We don't believe in any of these traditions. Now, I want to take a second to talk about not just the funeral, but the funeral is where we get introduced to these two characters, Ustad and his son, Hendra. Ustad, as I understand, he kind of functions like he's a religious figure. He kind of functions similar to like a priest, I guess, who would, oversee the funeral and is constantly, trying to get the family to start back praying and giving themselves over to Allah. He's the person that they come to for guidance when they're afraid. And he reminds them that there's nothing you should fear except Allah. There's nothing you should fear except Allah. So if you put your faith in Allah and you trust him, then you will be okay. Because there's no greater force in the universe than Allah. And so he is that person who tries to tell them, this is what will save you. Whatever you have going on, you will be saved if you put your faith and your trust in Allah. Hendra, his son, is not as forceful with the religious stuff. But as they are all leaving the funeral, Hendra kind of tries to introduce himself to Rini. It feels kind of cringy because he's kind of like, hey, how you doing? I'm Hendra. Da, da, da. Like trying to strike up a conversation. And it's like, didn't you just help bury her mom? Like, why are you trying to make a move right now, Hendra? That's kind of weird, sir. But Hendra ends up becoming incredibly useful and helping validate the things that Rini is going through. So I'll get to that in a minute. But now that Mortuary is dead and gone, a lot of strange things start happening in the house. I really like how the movie does like the atmospheric horror, because one of the things I noticed in this movie is that people don't be closing their doors. And I don't know if this is an Indonesian culture thing, because I cannot sleep with my door open, but all the doors are open like all the time. So there's a lot of really, really cool shots where a character may be in one room, but because the door behind them is open, you're seeing into a different room where there might be some weird stuff happening in the background that you can't fully see because the focus is in the current room. And I thought that was really interesting. Toni, the second eldest son, he's like 16, and as I mentioned before, he was kind of like, he's the fun-loving teenager, but he sold his bike in order to, get more money for food for the family. He sold his watch, and, all he really has now is a radio. He likes to turn on the radio, and he likes to go to sleep to it. As he is going to sleep to the sound of the radio magically just tunes itself to a different frequency, and it starts playing his mother's song. He sees it, thinks, oh, that's weird. Let me just turn it back to the station that I had it on. Turns it back to the station he had it on, tries to go sleep. It turns back to Mortuary's song. And this keeps happening until eventually he's just like, okay, I'm gonna turn this thing off. Like, this is weird. But as he's messing around with that, he hears his mother's voice telling him to come and comb her hair. And it's a really, really great jump scare in that moment. This ghost, who you think for the majority of the movie is his mother, is like, Toni, come comb my hair. And he literally finds the comb as he is being scared by her. Like, oh my God, this is real. The comb is here. Now, does he exactly know what's going on? No, but he does not doubt himself. He does not gaslight himself and say, oh my God, I must be crazy. He's literally like, okay, my mother's spirit is here. It's not resting safely. So he will go. So he goes to her grave and he puts the bell and the comb. He buries the bell and the comb in with her grave and says, I hope that you can rest easy now. Because he understands that she's not resting. She's not at peace. And that's why I'm still seeing her in the house. So he doesn't doubt himself at all. But Rini does. Rini doubts a lot of the stuff that she hears and sees. And she'll doubt herself. She'll doubt what people tell her because she just doesn't want to believe any of that. She wants to believe that all of this is in everybody's head and we're all just, we're going crazy with grief from what happened to mom. Then another tragedy happens and you kind of see it. They don't fully show it. Like, they don't show the full thing, but there's just kind of these weird back-to-back clips. Like, they're doing one part of the story and then there's a clip of the grandmother standing up out of her wheelchair because she's wheelchair bound. So she's standing up out of her wheelchair. She's looking genuinely afraid. And it just, cuts back to Rini and them, and they're doing all their stuff. And it's very subtle. Something's happening, but it doesn't all play out directly in front of you. It doesn't happen until later. When Rini and them come home, they notice that the wheelchair is in the living room and it's empty. And they don't know where grandmother is. Rini and Bondi go into the well room, the water room. And the grandmother's body is in the well. And obviously this is extremely traumatic for Bondi. He's screaming. He doesn't know what to do. Rini is horrified. Like, how did this even happen? Like, how did she end up in the well? She's wheelchair bound. She can't walk. You hadn't seen her walk this whole time. But all of a sudden now she's at the bottom of the well. This is the well that they, get all their water out of, by the way. Like, it's really gross. A lot of stuff happens in this well, and I'm like, y'all still drinking and bathing and washing your dishes and stuff, and that's dead body water. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to the story. Sorry. But so then another funeral happens, and everybody's distraught, and Bondi is like, he's in shock, he's sick, he can't handle it. He's like, when the mother died, it was kind of a thing of like, we knew this was coming. Even Bondi, he felt bad about it, but his father Bari was like, look, we knew she was going to die. She's been sick for years. She's no longer in pain anymore. So it was a different type of grief and a different type of reaction to her dying. When the grandmother dies, and I'm being disrespectful without the grandmother's name, so let me see if I can put a grandmother's name real quick. When Rahma dies, it's like, this is actually like a serious like shock to everyone because of the way that she died. And after burying her, Rini kind of justifies it again by like, she probably like tripped and failed. It was obviously an accident, just trying to make sense of it. But none of it makes sense. And that adds to the unease. Even Rini, who's trying to make sense of it all, none of it actually makes sense as to why she would have died. And I'm gonna get to this part again, but let me cut back, because again, there's more than one storyline going on at a time in this movie, which I really like.